That's quite an introduction. It's like longer than my slide talk. So that's right. I've worked for all these large companies, and I've had, numerous responsibilities, most of it successfully accomplished. The one I think I would like to point out is VNU, which is or was the world's largest B2B publisher. I spent 6 years there, so I speak our language from multiple directions. I speak B2C, B2B, and I'm here to tell you that the concept between B2B, B2C, and the media is changing. And we have to change our business platforms to be more than just B2B. So, before I speak, I do all kinds of exhaustive research. It's a privilege to come here to you guys, and I mean that honestly. I'm happy to be here in Toronto to explain my research. So here's what I found. Your geese are different. You have a different approach when it comes to maps. For some reason, some parts of Canada, you tell time differently. Your hockey is different. Child rearing is different. And the Canadian mailbox in the winter is completely different. Canadian vandalism is not like you would see it in the United States. And you have a unique approach to birds, fauna, and other animals. So with all that being said, let's get down to the publishing industry. We have always had a tremendous amount of nostalgia for the publishing industry about how things were in our business. That is a good thing, but nostalgia shouldn't hold us back from new successes. I think we can all agree that we're at the beginning of a new chapter in the history of media, and not the end of the last chapter in our book. What we have gone through in the last 2 decades is still just the beginning. But I am more hopeful for our industry today than ever before. Today I will share a wide range of data, observations about our industry, some not so good, not so enjoyable stats, and some really encouraging great news. But the bottom line, as I see it, it is a good and positive future for anyone in the communication business. So I also found out in my research that you're technological leaders, that you guys have the first pneumatic tube to share information intra-office, which I think is a noble and great thing to have done, inter-office communication. At a recent newsstand seminar held in November, Glenn Morgan, CEO of Coast to Coast, presented some interesting findings, looking at 3,900 English magazines in Canada. One factoid in particular was a real eye-opener. In 2015, close to 15 million copies of English language magazines were sold on Canadian newsstands throughout the mass market wholesaler network. This doesn't include any French language magazines sold in Canada or any copies sold through the direct-to-retail channels, which are both considerable. Assuming a 12-hour day shopping window, 9 a.m. to 9 a.m., here's how 55 million copies breaks down. In the next hour, 13,000 magazines will be sold on Canadian newsstands. In the next day, 152,000 magazines will be purchased by Canadian customers. In terms of total retail dollars, almost $1 million a day of magazines are sold in Canada. Pretty impressive. We also learned an important fact about cover prices. According to BoxScore, the average price of a magazine in Canada in 2015 was $6.26, up from $5.45 in 2012, which is an increase of almost 15%. If you haven't considered raising a price, it may be time to do so. Now on to 2017 and beyond. As you know, the British have a saying put to great effect during World War II. I think the publishing community should remember this concept and go beyond it. Publishing success in the 21st century is to keep calm and be awesome. Many of the people in our industry are still in one way or another devoted to the process of print, and understandably so. In most cases, that's where the traditional revenue still is. Most of us have a strong and deep bias, which is clearly and understandably centered around making a profitable living. Nothing wrong with that. Actually, this bias comes twofold. Not only is it based on our need to make a living and feed the family, but it's also our professional and personal comfort zone. We like what we know and what we are used to. Sometimes it's hard to move past traditional thinking because we are wired to be safe. That cripples us from creativity. The truth is we need to take risk. You have to challenge your assumptions. So let's talk about challenging our assumptions. Let's start here. How is media being consumed in today's environment? The first thing we need to understand in today's media business environment is that attention is monetizable. But perhaps even more important is that not all attention gets meaningful ROI results. I'll get back to that later. Everyone in this room has a smart device, perhaps even two, that knows more than we do, that gives us access to the world of information and people. An important part of the how is media being consumed in today's environment is to know exactly what we do with our time with media, any media. This is a chart you probably can't read. It's from eMarketer. It shows that we spent 4 hours each day with a digital device in 2012, and will spend 6 hours a day by 2018 on digital. It also shows that in 2012, we spent 40 minutes per day with print, and we are forecasted to spend 26 minutes with print in 2018. That's a 35% expected drop-off from the 2012 numbers. The data parallels Mary Meeker's reports of annual trends. As you can see, this is from 2010. A few key data points. Look at the print. It received 8% of time spent with media and had 27% of the ad spend. That's a critical piece of data. Here's the latest chart, 2015, 5 years later. In the past 5 years, the amount of time spent using mobile devices for digital media consumption has exploded, from less than an hour in 2010 to almost 5 hours in 2015. The mobile growth has been almost all new growth since 2010. The amount of time spent with desktops and other connected devices has remained basically the same. With the exception of print, people are finding new time in their days to use mobile devices. That's fascinating. Could it be the 24-hour day is longer than we thought? This is, of course, mobile ad spending in Canada, by format, with digital search now getting the lion's share. Here's where the majority of advertising spend is going: Facebook, Google, and others. Why, you might ask? Think of what's happening this way. By 2021, nearly 90% of all internet traffic will be from smartphones. That is both an amazing statistic and an important one for all of us to keep in our minds. Keep in mind that attention is monetizable. I will point out that in a typical day in the life of mobile users, our time seems to be spent on average with only 3 apps. In the US, they are Facebook, Chrome, and YouTube. To that point, I suggest that not all attention is meaningful attention. And again, I'll get back to that later. More than 2/5 of all digital ad spending in the US will go to Google this year, with Facebook in its second place. No other digital publisher will enjoy even 4% of total revenues. 20 years after the first online advertising runs, digital advertising takes the largest share of ad spend. Double-digit growth to continue without end in sight. And I threw this in as a little tangential, but I was fascinated. This chart's about people who want to cut the cord, which I think is parallel to our digital use. And Vancouver, most progressive, 26% people in Vancouver want to cut the cord, and here in Toronto it's 24%. That's indicative of a desire to be involved in the digital mobile universe. So, what's going on? What we now know is that technological growth that once took multiple generations to achieve now happens in months. Technology is evolving at such an accelerated rate that we really have no chance of keeping up with it. Not legally, not legislatively, not socially, not strategically, in fact, hardly at all on any meaningful level. We are not just experiencing a digital revolution, it's also a social revolution. Earlier this year, The Economist unveiled interesting results on a new set of research into the media consumption habits of young people. The findings confirmed what had long been suspected throughout the global media industry. The critical point they found was that people no longer draw a distinction between new media and legacy media brands. That is a critical piece of data. The Economist's Nick Burden said, this generation, and in particular a subset of them, which we've called the generators, is an extremely influential group within millennials as a whole. About 1 in 3 millennials falls into this category of generators. And what we found out about them is that they're some of the most sophisticated media consumers the world has ever seen. And actually, they're as willing to use traditional media as they are new media. They don't see the difference. When it comes to content, they are interested in all different kinds of content and all different kinds of topics. They consume more media than any other generation that's gone before us. That's good news. And the way they consume it is more varied. So, with that in mind, what have we already reimagined in this information revolution? Well, we don't do payphones like we used to. Remember how we used to look things up? Remember carrying a camera and working with negatives and film? Remember pens and pencils for note-taking? How about storing files and folders? Do you remember cash registers? Who goes to a bank now? Not even for lending. Human resources then and human resources now. We have even reimagined thermostats. When's the last time you used the Yellow Pages to look up a phone number? Amazing as it may seem, we have also changed what a signature is. And of course, we have reinvented how we get the news. What isn't different? Reading. Did you know that for some types of magazines, as in regional titles, demand for print is actually higher than it was 10 or 20 years ago? According to third-party data by MPA, a high of 90% of Americans are still reading print magazines. When directly asked what their preferred format for reading is, respondents said they routinely preferred paper. This makes me ask, what about the time spent with media charts? I think the answer lies in the niche experience of many quality titles, just like yours. As an example, a few weeks ago, I spoke to the City Regional Magazine Association in Charlotte, North Carolina. They are thriving in print, and so are many other enthusiast titles. So it comes down to what category is your title in for continued and ongoing success. Which leads me to the next question. What the heck is a magazine? A magazine is a collection of assorted pleasures, a storehouse of information, both in tiny buckets and long-form thinking, that comes to us entirely sorted, collected without our participation. Somebody or some bodies delivers to us an organized collection of opinions, perspectives, facts, and constructs of another mind, or perhaps a collection of minds. This way, we are offered the chance at premeditated discovery, the chance of intentionally constructed serendipity. When picking up a magazine or a book, it's a determination and a declaration of premeditated reading. Now let's talk about reading and advertising. Having lived through amazing transformations and reimagining across the entire media industry, we have, in a span of a few years, accepted that content and attention span has emerged as the central currency linking brands and the public. As a result, sweeping changes in media advertising and technology are in motion. Marketers and publishers are working closer together than ever before, and well, they should. Does science matter in media? The haptic experience between print and digital is mainly a different feel, a different sensation, and perhaps above all else, a different expectation. Print doesn't offer distractions other than the words and thinking on the page, while the digital experience does. Just knowing that you can click and go somewhere else is very seductive, even if you can stay focused. You know in the background of your brain that you can travel behind your current involvement. With print, the expectation is built right into the product as linear, fixed, with no possibility of surfing beyond the next page. This is grounding too. This grounding is in the background of your brain, and those particular expectations make for a different reading experience. Here's what we know. Paper stimulates a stronger emotional response. Memory and comprehension is better when reading on paper. Paper is more action-oriented than digital because its physical format stimulates mental processes that guide consumer behavior. We know all this, but advertisers are leaving us behind anyway. This is fact. This is science. Despite important changes in media consumption in recent years, consumers continue to have the most trust in advertising in magazines and newspapers. It seems the power of the printed word still rings true and has great value when evaluating advertising. When asked how much they trust in various medias, consumers gave magazines and newspapers a score of 63%, TV 41%, the internet 25%. What's interesting is that so-called traditional media such as direct mail and catalogs also outscore social media and the internet respectively when it comes to trust. I think a case can be made that reading on the web requires a modern kind of discipline to actually finish the article you started to read. Whereas in print, there's nowhere else to go but finish what you picked up to read. Now, I'm not saying just because we read printed products, we finish it. In many cases, we don't. The same is true, perhaps even more so, for the digital experience. Not everybody finishes every article regardless of the substrate. To get readers to finish anything containing words requires good writing, good editing, and a compelling subject. It's addictive content properly constructed and distributed that brings success to any magazine in print or on the web. It is that simple and that hard. So what do we need to understand? Canada has changed. The world has changed. The world is now connected. The world is more sophisticated. Marketing and advertising is more complex than ever before, and in the next 10 years of advertising, we will rely completely on adapting to our largely tech-driven utopian vision of making every single message relevant to the receiver. If you consider yourself able to predict the future with any reasonable degree of accuracy, you'll know that a solid human understanding is absolutely essential for success. And that is what we should all be good at, a solid human understanding. Over the next 10 years, advertising and marketing will move from communicating to predicting. Based on real-time human needs, without a doubt, we're going to witness a shift from obsessing over what advertising looks like to what advertising feels like. Our media lives will be more automated, slicker, and quicker. Advertisers and marketers will know how much we like their ads and programs, probably because of our wearables will tell them. And because of this close relationship with brands, every ad you see, those in print or out, will be based on who you are. The writer Bob Garfield said, "We are in the dawning of the relationship era, in which brands must find human connections between themselves and stakeholders, as opposed to purchasing attention for the purpose of persuading strangers to buy something." It's about how we emerge from the rubble of mass media and mass marketing and forge sustainable relationships based on shared interests and shared values, and to lower marketing costs in the process. So what else do we need to consider? Over the past 5 years, billions of dollars in advertising spend has been moved from print to media to digital. If you push advertisers or their media agencies for the rationale for this switch, it does not take long to get to the immovable economic argument of CPM. That is the cost to reach 1,000 consumers. Rarely can any business sustain itself with a tenfold price premium over its competition. But let's pause for a moment and move our attention from the C to the M in CPM. Measuring media audiences has never been an exact science, but the recent advances in digital media have lowered that already wobbly bar several notches further. Not even the most naive professional believes that the audience numbers of 1,000 that have been bought for $10 actually equals to 1,000. The real question is how many of the 1,000 will actually see a digital ad long enough to process it? Of the 1,000 we purchased, how many are actually bots and not humans? Ad fraud is a huge and growing issue in digital advertising. And the latest data estimates that bots account for at least 11% of the digital display advertising audience. And that figure increases by 40% for more valuable ads. Publishers sometimes use traffic sourcing, which is any method by which publishers acquire more visitors through their sites through third parties. They do this to improve measured audience levels at their sites. But when they do use source traffic, it averages out to be 52% bots. Now let's ask of the supposed 1,000 that we may or may not have reached despite the bot numbers, how many of the readers have invested in ad blocking software to ensure that their browsing experience is ad-free? The numbers of ad blocking users is reaching a watershed period of growth, and it will not stop. This is Canada. Again, BC is up there in the highest, but you're not too far behind. 17% people have ad blockers. An obvious point is that digital fraud goes up as the digital ad spend goes up. Let's add to this, just because you can view a digital ad does not mean you will view it. Digital ads have an annoying habit of appearing above, below, or to the side of the viewing area that the consumer is exposed to. The question is, even if they do see it, will they actually see it long enough to process it? I could go on for hours about this topic, but in the future, let's take a few more skeptical look at the M the next time CPM data is trotted out. 1,000 digital viewers is never equal to 1,000 pairs of eyeballs. But what it actually is one of the biggest questions in all of media, in the media's marketplace today. Michael and I were chatting just a few minutes ago about Procter & Gamble last week threw the gauntlet down to the agency business. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, we're not paying for fraud anymore. Do something. And I hope something gets done. In all this talk, it may shock you, I am a digital futurist. I have always believed in the future of the digital process, that the predominant way people will read will be digital. I am also a fan of magazines. Magazines aren't going away. Your magazines must move from a commodity to a luxury item. Anything that's left in print needs to be a luxury item, or there's no point in putting it in print. Your readers will appreciate it, and that's the way to add increased value. But I'm going to discuss value and brand extensions, which is why I said at the beginning, not all attention gets meaningful ROI results. And as Deming once said, without the correct data, you're just another person with an opinion. In an environment of unlimited content, there is also by default unlimited advertising. What is the revenue destiny of unlimited ads and unlimited content? Answer, decreased value. Only material things that are rare and unique have value. The important question here is how rare, how unique, and how indispensable are your publications? I'm very sure that 10 years from now, when we look back at this era of big data that we're now involved in, we'll be stunned by how uninformed we used to be when we made decisions. What we are experiencing is not so much the challenge of adapting to ever-changing technology, but rather the absolutely fundamental shifts in communication patterns and processes. Communication patterns between people, between people and businesses, and between businesses and businesses have forever been altered. The longevity of any publishing business plan is to subject radical changes from unseen events and unpredictable catalysts. These consist of social and technological advances that cannot be forecast to any great extent. Whether B2B or B2C, I believe passionately that good marketing essentials are the same. We are all emotional beings looking for relevance, context, and connection. Many people and companies may see these trends that I have been talking about, but lack the courage or the expertise to utilize them for the future of their businesses. This is often through a concern about the impact on their current mode of business. Here's a key message that comes from this that applies to all businesses. It is your future business that should replace your current business before someone else replaces it for you. We're living in a time period that will transform all businesses, a period where constant innovation is required, not only to stay competitive, but to survive. We've just discussed the many forces driving change in media and the still evolving advertising model itself. In the next few years, we will be seen as an inflection point for media, where bold action decides who succeeds or who fails in the next 3 to 5 years. As John Sexton of the New York Times said it best, ain't no room for cowards in media at this moment in time. If you are not asking yourself every couple of years how to once more scare yourself to death, then you are living something of a coward's life. Are you collecting data? If so, is it the right data? How are you monetizing the data you collect? Diversification is an opportunity. Just because your brand might be vulnerable doesn't mean it should be static. Media companies shouldn't necessarily consider themselves to be solely media companies. What really matters is how your customers perceive you and how you can leverage that relationship. The question we should be considering is this: we're accustomed to telling people what to do. Why aren't we enabling them to do it? What we should be doing is making it simpler for the consumer to do what they want to do. As we all know, the publishing industry is transforming from print-focused concept to a broader, more media-diverse, media-branded approach to content distribution. With a strong brand, a magazine can and should be many things. In the new approach, there are many extensions of the branded experience that lead to revenue success, and in many cases, better, broader, and more stable empires than in the past. Active Interest Media is just a company I love. They are a B2C, but what they do easily could be done by you in this room. They are a perfect example of brand extensions and off-the-page thinking. AIM has 5 distinct publishing groups and publishes some of America's leading consumer enthusiast magazines, such as Yoga Journal, Backpacker, Vegetarian Times, Yachts, American Cowboy, goes on and on. I think the key phrase here is consumer enthusiast magazines. Look at the diversity of this publishing house and the broad reach they have. No single topic of concentration in this publisher's enterprise, but rather 5 main categories, each with a broad range of brands that satisfy passionate readers and, in their way, their particular interests. A few months ago, I had a conversation with AIM's president, Andy Curlman, and Andy said, today's operative words are diversification and proliferation. We are continually finding seams within the verticals we're in of unfulfilled audience interests and needs. What Andy is saying here, and what all publishers, large or small, must be considering is the revenue extension possibilities of your readers' consumers' passions. In our conversation, Andy went on to say, with more ways than ever before at our disposal to serve those interests in the form of print, multimedia, live events, education, services, the opportunities seem to be endless. This is what we need to think about. What other services can we sell our readership? Think out of the main publishing box. Your readers want more, and you can and should provide it. Events and brand extensions have emerged as a new revenue stream for publishers that understand their audience and are intent on building stronger relationships around the passion for the brand. The Wall Street Journal is selling wine as an additional source of income. That is a fair and unexpected example of a brand extension. Wine from the Wall Street Journal. The National Geographic is in the game. Who would have expected that? So in these times of revenue-challenged media enterprises, we all need to start asking new questions. It's not what your branded publication once did for you, but rather what you can do now with the brand you have. By that I mean publishing has by necessity grown bigger in a digital age than just maintaining a traditional magazine brand. For sustainable success, we must consider all the many things a properly functioning and extended brand can deliver. With savvy forethought, we can all aim higher and broader and find revenue streams that didn't exist before. What's in your offices and archives that can be repurposed for additional revenue? Do you ask your entire team, what else can we do? Remember, it doesn't have to be ink on paper, but using your brand for extra cash in a new and unusual way. Finally, a few closing observations. If you do want to survive, change is inevitable and required to keep pace with the changing conditions. Organizations must constantly review, evaluate, and adjust their businesses and adjust operations to new conditions in order to grow and be successful. They need to be prepared to learn new skills, take advantage of new trends, and adapt to unforeseen circumstances. Our job is to connect to people, to interact with them in ways that leave them better than when we found them, more able to get where they'd like to go. What we need in the 21st century is instant, on-the-fly, real-time, personalized services based on the customer's needs in that exact moment. Eventually, nothing else will be profitable or acceptable. This is a great time to rethink the unthinkable. This is a unique and historic period where the unthinkable has never been more possible. We live in a period of experimentation, innovation, and entrepreneurism that the world has never seen before. The strategic positioning of yourselves and your companies as innovators is the most positive thing you can do in this environment. If you put yourself as part of the innovative future and you manage to work with a company that is a great innovator, you will more than just survive, you will prosper and thrive. Stay alert to how media is being consumed. Remember the new formula that attention is monetizable. Consider that people no longer draw a distinction between new media and legacy media brands. Remember that millennials consume more media than any other generation. Science proves that haptic is touch, the experience of print is real and positive. Remember that digital CPMs, in my opinion, are totally suspect. It's easy to predict the future of the internet with abstract cliches and statistics. It's more important to think about ways you can use such technology to build tighter relationships with your consumers. Don't focus on macro trends. Instead, look for a narrow, specific way you can leverage those trends to make your customers' lives easier, help them be smarter, make them and their lives less complicated. Technology that helps is what people want. And I predict that that desire will keep growing. And no matter how fast technology changes, we need to change with it. It's more important to think about ways you can use technology to build a tighter relationship with customers. So, lastly, I'm with the great publishing visionary Wayne Gretzky, and he was correct when he said, I skate to the puck where the puck will be and not where it's been. I thank you. Pleasure to be here. Maybe there's a question or two. I threw the kitchen sink at you in 38 minutes, give or take. And just for the record, that was 147 slides in 38 minutes. Just wanted to know what you just lived through. Thank you.